In the far reaches of the southwestern plains, where the earth stretches wide beneath a vault of endless sky, the sun burns hot, and the wind carries stories older than memory. This was the world Elijah Carter inhabited, a man etched into the landscape as surely as the gnarled juniper trees that dotted his land. His ranch, sprawling and weathered, was a patchwork of dry pastures, dusty trails, and the occasional stubborn cactus. It was a land that demanded strength and solitude in equal measure, and Elijah had long accepted the isolation as both companion and curse. Elijah was a man of few words, his face weathered and lined from years under the sun. His eyes, sharp and steady, held a quiet sadness, the kind that speaks of dreams lost and battles fought in silence. The ranch was his sanctuary, the only home he'd known since tragedy ripped through his life. Years ago, his wife had succumbed to a lingering illness, leaving him alone with a young son who had soon after been taken by a cruel twist of fate on the very land Elijah now tended. The weight of grief had pushed him inward, shaping him into a man who worked with steady hands and spoke in terse phrases, preferring the company of cattle and the unyielding rhythm of ranch life to the complicated presence of other humans. On a late afternoon, as the horizon bled into shades of amber and rose, Elijah's solitude was broken by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Joe, a gaunt man from the nearby town with a reputation as a drunkard and troublemaker, stumbled onto the ranch road. His clothes hung loosely on his frail frame, stained and worn from years of hard living. Clutched in his arms was a small bundle, a girl, no older than 12, wrapped in a tattered blanket that barely concealed the dirt smudged across her pale face and tangled hair. Joe's eyes were bloodshot, his breath heavy with the scent of alcohol. His voice was rough and slurred as he muttered, "I don't want her no more. You take her. Just get her off my back." His hands trembled as he shoved the girl toward Elijah, desperation flickering in his gaze. The girl, silent and still, looked up with wide, dark eyes that shimmered with confusion and fear. She did not cry or protest. In fact, she didn't respond at all, her lips pressed tightly together, her gaze distant yet strangely attentive. Elijah took the girl into his care without much ceremony. The exchange was quick, a transaction born from Joe's need to escape responsibility and Elijah's tacit acceptance of fate. Yet, beneath the practicality lay something deeper, a shared loneliness, a quiet yearning for connection. As Joe disappeared down the dusty road, stumbling into the fading light, Elijah turned to the girl and saw in her a reflection of his own isolation. Her name was Mia, though she never spoke it aloud. Elijah soon discovered that Mia was deaf, or so it seemed. She did not respond to sound, nor did she attempt to speak. Instead, she moved through the world with a silence that was profound and complete. Watching her, Elijah saw a resilience shaped by hardship, years of neglect, the cruelty of a drunken father, and the cold indifference of a community that had turned away. Mia's silence was not just the absence of hearing. It was a shield, a fortress built to protect a fragile heart. The ranch, once a place of quiet routine, now echoed with the weight of Mia's presence. Elijah observed her cautiously at first. She explored the wide, open spaces with a tentative curiosity, her small hands brushing over the rough textures of wood and stone, her feet stirring up clouds of dust. She watched the cattle with wide eyes, her fingers tracing the patterns of sunlight and shadow. Yet, always there was the silence, an absence that seemed to fill every corner of the land with a poignant stillness. Elijah tried to communicate. He spoke slowly, enunciating each word, his voice low and steady. He gestured with his hands, hoping to bridge the gap between them. But Mia only blinked, her eyes searching his face as if trying to understand a language she had never been taught. The gulf between them was wide, yet Elijah was not deterred. In her silence, he saw not a limitation, but a challenge, an invitation to listen in ways beyond sound. As days turned into weeks, the bond between Elijah and Mia grew in subtle, unspoken ways. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the sound of hooves, the scent of rain, the feel of earth beneath her fingertips. Elijah found himself watching her with a protective tenderness, a quiet admiration for her strength. She was a mystery wrapped in silence, a soul as raw and untamed as the land itself. One evening, under a sky sprinkled with stars, Elijah sat beside Mia near the fire pit. The flames crackled and danced, casting flickering shadows on their faces. The cool night air was filled with the scent of burning wood and distant pine. Elijah spoke softly, telling her stories of the land, the history of the ranch, and the memories that haunted him. Mia listened intently, her eyes reflecting the firelight, but still, no words came from her lips. Then, almost absent-mindedly, Elijah clapped his hands once, a sharp, sudden sound meant to catch her attention. To his astonishment, Mia turned her head quickly toward the noise, her eyes alert and bright. He repeated the clap, and again she responded, her gaze following the sound with unmistakable awareness. Elijah's heart raced. Could it be that Mia was not truly deaf? Had her silence been a mask, a protective shell built from years of pain and neglect? That night, as the fire burned low and the world slipped into quiet sleep, Elijah lay awake with questions swirling in his mind. The girl he had thought lost to silence might have been listening all along. This revelation sparked a new hope, a possibility that stirred something deep within Elijah's hardened heart. If Mia could hear, then perhaps she could learn to speak, to connect, to heal. The ranch, once a place of solitude and loss, might become a home filled with laughter and life. But Elijah knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain. Teaching Mia would require patience and courage from both of them. As the first light of dawn painted the sky with pale hues, Elijah made a silent vow. He would protect Mia, help her find her voice, and perhaps, in doing so, find his own. Together, they would navigate the silence, transforming it into a language of hope and belonging. The days that followed Elijah's startling discovery that Mia could hear unfolded slowly, each one layered with tentative hope and quiet determination. Elijah had always known the ranch required patience, but teaching a girl who had lived in silence all her life to engage with sound and speech was a challenge unlike any other he had faced. Yet, beneath his rugged exterior was a heart quietly yearning for connection, for someone who could share this lonely land and, perhaps, heal the wounds they both carried. Elijah's mornings began with a new routine. After feeding the cattle and checking the fences, he would sit with Mia on the worn wooden porch overlooking the vast plains. The sun would warm their faces, and the world would seem to hold its breath as he carefully tried to bridge the silence between them. His voice, once rough and low, softened as he spoke slowly and deliberately, repeating simple words, water, food, horse, hoping that she might begin to associate sounds with objects. But Mia's eyes often betrayed a different story. She wasn't just deaf. She had spent years adapting to a world without sound. Her senses had sharpened in other ways. Her eyes followed the smallest movements. Her hands felt subtle vibrations in the air and earth, and her lips would sometimes move as if silently mouthing words she could not speak aloud. It was clear that the silence around her was not a void, but a complex language of its own, rich with texture and meaning invisible to others. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with gold, Elijah brought a small wooden whistle he had found at the general store. He blew gently, producing a soft, shrill note that carried on the breeze. Mia flinched, but then watched the instrument with curiosity. Elijah handed it to her, and she held it awkwardly, her fingers tentative. When she blew into it, a weak, wavering sound emerged, more a breath than a whistle. Elijah smiled, feeling a spark of triumph. Encouraged, Elijah tried other sounds, tapping stones together, snapping fingers, calling out the names of animals on the ranch. With each sound, Mia's eyes would flicker, sometimes following the noise, sometimes remaining distant. But gradually, the moments when she turned her head toward the source of the sound became more frequent. Elijah began to understand that Mia's hearing was partial, inconsistent, and fragile, but it was there. It was a revelation that reshaped everything he thought he knew about her. The breakthrough came unexpectedly one evening. Elijah was repairing a broken fence when he heard Mia's soft voice behind him. Startled, he turned quickly to see her lips moving in an attempt to form a word. It was a sound so faint it might have been mistaken for the whisper of the wind. "What?" she said, the word trembling on her tongue. Elijah's breath caught. He dropped the tools he held and knelt beside her, his heart pounding with disbelief and joy. "Yes, Mia," he said gently, reaching out to touch her hand. "Water." He repeated the word slowly, encouraging her to try again. She looked at him with wide eyes, then whispered it once more, a little stronger this time. Tears welled in Elijah's eyes, for in that moment, he saw not just a girl learning to speak, but a soul reaching out from the depths of silence. From then on, their days took on a new rhythm, a dance of sound and silence, words and gestures. Elijah taught Mia to recognize sounds and associate them with meaning. He used a mix of spoken words, simple sign language he had picked up from a book he found in the town's small library, and patient repetition. Mia was a quick learner, her determination shining through every effort. Slowly, the walls that silence had built around her began to crumble. Yet, the journey was not without its struggles. Mia's past weighed heavily on her. Sometimes, when Elijah raised his voice or the world grew too loud with unfamiliar sounds, she would retreat into herself, her eyes clouding with fear and pain. Elijah learned to read these moments, to pull back and give her space, speaking softly or communicating through touch and gestures. Trust was fragile, and he was careful not to break it. On some evenings, Mia would sit alone under the star-filled sky, her gaze lost in the vastness above, as if wrestling with ghosts only she could see. Their bond deepened beyond words. They worked side by side on the ranch, Mia learning to care for the animals, her hands steady and sure despite her size. Elijah showed her how to saddle a horse, how to move quietly through the fields, how to listen with more than just ears. Mia, in turn, brought a lightness to Elijah's life he hadn't known he was missing. Her laughter, a sound rare and precious, echoed across the open land like a healing balm. One evening, after a long day of work, Elijah found Mia sitting by the creek that ran along the edge of the ranch. The water sparkled under the moonlight, and the world seemed still. Mia was tracing shapes in the dirt with a stick, her eyes reflecting the stars. Elijah sat beside her, feeling the peace of the moment. He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. Mia looked up at him, her eyes shining with understanding. Though she still struggled with words, her gaze spoke volumes. In that silent exchange, Elijah felt a profound connection, a bridge built not just from language but from shared experience, pain, and hope. But outside the sanctuary of the ranch, the world was less kind. Rumors about Mia's arrival spread through the town like wildfire. Some whispered that Elijah had taken a burden. Others questioned the wisdom of bringing a deaf girl to a place so isolated. Joe, her father, reappeared one day, staggering into the ranch, angry and demanding his daughter back. Elijah confronted him, his voice firm and unyielding. "She's not yours anymore," he said, "and she's safe here." The confrontation was a turning point. Joe left, defeated but vowing to return, and Elijah knew he would have to protect Mia not only from the elements and loneliness, but from the scars of her past. He began to teach her self-defense, to prepare her for the world beyond the ranch. Mia's strength grew, as did her voice, spoken and silent both. As seasons changed, so did their relationship. Spring brought with it a burst of life and energy. Mia reveled in the blooming wildflowers, learning their names, and practicing the sounds Elijah taught her. Summer was filled with long days in the fields, where Mia gained confidence riding horses and helping with the cattle. Autumn wrapped the ranch in gold and amber, a season of reflection where they shared stories beneath the harvest moon, their conversations blending spoken words and the gentle touch of hands. Through it all, Mia's voice grew stronger. She sang softly sometimes, a melody of hope and newfound joy that carried over the hills. Elijah listened, often amazed by the resilience and courage in the girl who had once been so silent. Together, they were rewriting the story of loss and loneliness, transforming it into one of healing and connection. Their story was far from simple, and the challenges ahead remained daunting. But in the quiet moments, under vast skies and endless stars, Elijah and Mia had found something rare, a language beyond words, a bond forged in silence and sound, and a hope that whispered of a brighter future. The ranch lay bathed in soft morning light, the endless plains stretching beneath a sky tinged with gentle hues of dawn. Yet beneath the peaceful exterior, Elijah felt a storm brewing. The quiet between him and Mia, the girl who had come to the ranch like a fragile secret, had shifted. Something unsettled stirred in her, an unspoken tension that weighed heavily on Elijah's heart. That morning, Elijah woke before the sun fully rose, instinct nudging him out of bed. He padded quietly to the small cabin's porch, breathing in the crisp air scented faintly of pine and earth. But the silence felt thicker than usual. When he glanced toward Mia's room, the bed was empty. A knot tightened in his stomach. Mia, his voice was low, gentle, yet edged with concern. No answer. Elijah hurried through the cabin, checking corners, the kitchen, the yard. Nothing. Panic prickled his skin as he moved toward the creek at the edge of the property, a place Mia had often retreated to when overwhelmed. There, he found her, sitting on a smooth stone, knees pulled close, eyes fixed on the water's rippling surface. The faintest tremor caught her lips. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The words were fragile, trembling, almost lost on the wind. But Elijah caught them clearly. His breath hitched. Mia's voice had been a quiet flicker, a ghost of sound since he took her in. But now these words, simple, human, raw, carried weight. She was speaking, hesitating but yearning to be heard. "What's wrong, Mia?" Elijah asked softly, moving closer. She blinked away tears, her fingers tracing circles in the dirt. "I heard him last night. Joe." Elijah's heart clenched. Joe, her father, a man haunted by liquor and rage, was the shadow stalking Mia's past. The memory of that desperate night when Joe had sold her had been etched painfully in Elijah's mind. He hadn't expected Joe to return, but the fear in Mia's eyes told him otherwise. "We'll face him," Elijah promised, voice steady. Together, that promise felt like a shield against the darkness creeping toward them. For days, Elijah and Mia prepared. The ranch, usually quiet except for the steady hum of nature, buzzed with their new routine. Mia trained under Elijah's careful guidance, learning to stand firm, to defend herself not just physically but emotionally. They practiced hand signals, strengthening their communication, building trust like bricks in a fortress. Elijah also taught her how to sense the land around her, to anticipate danger before it arrived, to find strength not just in muscles but in calmness of mind. Mia's voice grew stronger, too, small syllables turning into words, words into sentences. One afternoon, Elijah found her sitting by the porch, whispering a poem she had overheard from a neighbor. Her voice trembled but carried a song of fragile hope. One evening, as the sky burned orange and pink, Elijah found Mia practicing quietly by the barn. She was humming, a soft, shaky tune, almost forgotten, but now alive. "Where did you learn that?" Elijah asked on his voice. Mia looked up, cheeks flushed. "My mother, before she left." The memory was bittersweet, but brought a new depth to their bond. They were no longer just two souls thrown together by chance. They were becoming family, stitched together by shared pain and healing. Then, the inevitable day arrived. Joe came to the ranch. His arrival was sudden and chaotic, a storm bursting through the calm. Elijah was mending fences when he heard shouting, rough footsteps pounding on the gravel path. Joe stumbled out of the shadows, eyes wild, breath smelling of whiskey and regret. Give me back my girl. Joe roared, staggering toward Mia, who stood behind Elijah, trembling but unafraid. Elijah stepped forward, his frame solid and unwavering. She's not yours anymore. You lost that right. Joe sneered, rage twisting his features. You think you can keep her from me? She's mine. Elijah's eyes narrowed. No, she's mine now, and I won't let you hurt her again. The confrontation teetered on violence. Joe lunged, unsteady but dangerous. Elijah moved with a calm born of necessity, blocking, holding, controlling. Mia watched, fists clenched, ready to help. She stepped forward, surprising Joe by whispering words sharply, confidently, a declaration of her own strength. Leave, she said. The power in her voice stunned Elijah, a testament to her courage. Joe, defeated and humiliated, staggered away into the dusk, fading like a bad dream. But the aftermath was not simple relief. Elijah saw the tremble beneath Mia's brave facade. The battle had left scars that no fist could touch. Over the following days, he watched her retreat at times, her confidence wavering like the flame of a candle in a breeze. Elijah sat with her in quiet moments, sharing stories of his wife and son, his voice rich with memory and pain. He told her about the loneliness that had driven him to the ranch, and how caring for her had begun to heal wounds he thought would never close. Mia listened, a steady presence beside him, her own story unfolding like a fragile bloom. She opened up slowly, telling him of dreams she'd long hidden, of school, of music, of a life beyond the ranch. Together, they wove a new narrative, one of resilience, love, and second chances. The ranch thrived with life and laughter again. Mia learned to ride horses with grace, her hands steady and sure. She tended the animals, her eyes bright with purpose. Elijah found himself opening up in ways he hadn't dared before. He laughed more, sometimes even sang softly while working, filling the silence that had once felt so vast and cold. One afternoon, as golden leaves drifted on the breeze, Elijah and Mia climbed the hill overlooking the ranch. The vast landscape stretched endlessly, a canvas of hope beneath the setting sun. Mia turned to Elijah, a smile lighting her face. "Thank you," she said simply. Elijah's heart swelled. "No, Mia, thank you for teaching me to listen." They stood together, two souls once broken, now whole, ready to face whatever lay ahead, side by side. The night crept in around them, stars sparking in the deep velvet sky. The gentle sounds of the ranch, the rustle of wind through the grass, the distant calls of owls, felt like a lullaby for new beginnings. In that quiet moment, Elijah realized that the journey was not about erasing the past, but embracing it, letting it shape a future brimming with hope.